Hello and welcome to this second part where we explore why enterprise matters. And in particular in this session we're going to be looking at market transformation as part of our second topic area of enterprising nations. In particular we're going to stay with our first learning outcome that we explored in the last session. We're going to further examine the different roles that enterprise and entrepreneurship play in economic and social development. In short, again, we're going to understand why enterprise matters. Remember we said that there were three main arguments in understanding why enterprise matters. We said that it is important to create employment in small and growing companies in the last session, for example. This session, we're going to be looking at that it's important for stimulating technological change and innovation. It's important to reshape markets and stimulate economic growth and development. So let's talk a little bit about market transformation then, and in particular the concept of innovation. Now in the previous session we touched on Intel, Microsoft, Cisco and a couple of others. All of these companies are large corporations and they all changed the markets in which they operated when they were really quite small. They were and they still are all innovators. Now it's often argued that it is the small firms which have the new ideas and create the new products and services which change the world. And these original ideas came from Schumpeter in the early 20th century. So let's take a look at some small firm innovation, and in particular some data from GEM 2014. This data focuses on early stage enterprises and explores the extent of innovation. Now, the green and the red represent different things. The green is where the product is new for some or all customers. The red, though, represents where enterprises are exploring new markets, often with the same product. What's interesting here, though, are the percentages of enterprises involved in innovation per se. The far right-hand side of the graph, for example, you'll see two columns for North America. Now the red represents almost 60% of all small firms at the early stage of their development are involved in contacting and exploring new markets. Now, a little bit of history for you. I'm going to talk you through Schumpeter Mark I model. It's quite a complex set of ideas. So if you need to, feel free to press pause and read through this more thoroughly in more detail as we go on. So Schumpeter's Mark I model is described by Schumpeter in his book called The Theory of Economic Development. This is a piece of work that viewed technological change as a process of creative destruction. Technological process is seen as an uneven and random process, driven by a population of homogeneous firms fishing in a pool of technological opportunities which are accessible to everyone. In other words, the playing field is completely level. All firms are pretty much the same, and all of them are faced with the same pool of opportunities as each other. Innovation generates monopoly power, which is at best temporary, since it is quickly challenged and eventually eroded by the innovative success of competitors in the following period. Remember us saying that the pool of technological opportunities are the same. Therefore, why shouldn't other firms catch up with those that have the monopoly power? So, under these conditions, you would normally expect to find that typical innovators are small, newly established companies. So here, in this particular model, innovation and enterprise are strongly related, and the expectation is that without enterprise, the economy and economic structure and development would become moribund. So Schumpeter was identifying 5 different ways in which an entrepreneur can cause such changes. So he or she can produce changes by introducing a new good, or by the introduction of a new method of production, the opening of a new market, the conquest of a new source of supply of raw materials or half-manufactured products, or the carrying out of the new organisation of any industry. The important new element in Schumpeter was that the entrepreneur was seen as the key to a dynamic economy. They are the driver. This observation that enterprise can be a driver of economic renewal underpins much of the current policy based on entrepreneurship in the Western world. And you can see some examples here of Schumpeter's Mark I model. So in these specific industries, you can see that small firms lead the way in terms of innovation. So, for example, let's pick one out at random. Optical instruments and lenses, the fifth one down there in the column. You go to the right-hand side column, you'll see that within that particular industry, small firms have 63% ownership of the innovative products in that particular industry. But is this really correct today? Think about this from a practical viewpoint. If not, why not? And if yes, yes. So, press pause and consider, is the Schumpeter Mark I model correct today? And when you finish reflecting, move on. Okay, so hopefully you would have reflected a little bit on the value of the Mark I model as applied to today. If you have done this, great. So now let's move on to look at Schumpeter Mark II model. We need to fast forward 30 years to 1942, where Schumpeter was writing about innovation in capitalism, socialism and democracy. He changes his mind on some of the key points of innovation. Now he sees innovation as a process of accumulative accumulation. He emphasizes that technical knowledge has a strong tacit component and is highly specific to individual firms and applications. So, remembering Mark I model, he thought that firms were pretty much all the same. This time, in terms of the technical knowledge, he acknowledges that firms are highly individualistic. As a result, innovation results primarily from the in-house accumulation of technical knowledge and resources by heterogeneous companies. In other words, now we have the point that individual firms have highly specific technical knowledge that are specific to them and them alone. They build on this knowledge, this know-how, to build up expertise that stays within that firm. Therefore, firms are actually quite different to each other. As a consequence, leading-edge innovation is limited to a few leading-edge companies which acquire monopoly power and do come to dominate markets. Moreover, this leadership is going to be stable throughout time. So here we have some examples related to the Mark II model this time. Again, you can see examples of specific industries on the left-hand side. And these are examples where large firms are the leaders of innovation. Let's take one at random. Let's take aircraft right at the bottom there. So in the aircraft industry, you can see in the column on the right-hand side that only 3.1% of small firms are innovators. This means that the majority of innovation in the aircraft industry is done by large firms. One of the problems of Schumpeter's models, both Mark I and Mark II, is that they can be considered to be quite historical. Mark I, for example, was from 1912, and Mark II was 1942. So the question must be asked as to their relevance to today's society. Two researchers who have looked at this question are Roper and Hewitt Dundas, who have combined to produce a working paper that explores contemporary Schumpeter theory. They explore creative destruction via several thousand small firms. Now, their research was based on a working paper, so at the moment it is not completed, but the principles are the same. What they found was strong support for creative destruction from Schumpeter's Mark I. They also found the importance of family firms for new innovations. The importance of a range of technological and coordination capabilities was also important. So they concluded that maybe we should be looking at creating an interactive creative destruction model. A bit of a mouthful. Now, if you want to and you're particularly interested in Schumpeter's work, you can pause and you can read about Roper and Hewitt Dunder's paper on Learn. There's a copy in the Topic 2 area in the appropriate file.